What's good, everybody? It is Breaking Bet here on this Thursday, March 13th, and we got a special guest, as always, my guy, John Bowman, my co-host, the guy who I've been doing podcasts with for probably a little over a year at this point. This is a big week, John. We have conference play starting across the board. We got a little taste last week for mostly the ACC, a little bit of Big Ten, but now it's full-blown SEC, ACC, every single conference has got a conference matchup kicking off on Friday. What's good, JB?
I'm doing good, man. Like you said, conference play coming up. It's always a lot tougher than these non-conference matchups. And, we kind of know which programs have been good in the past and which programs are actually dangerous. Whereas now, we get into conference play and literally anything could happen. You have these terrible ACC teams winning, if they're at home against these really good top ACC teams for the most part. And pretty much every SEC team except Missouri winning against the top SEC teams. A lot going on these next few weeks.
Dude, I'm so excited. And listen, I took the small sample size we had last week with some of the ACC teams, and I got to say, I was so surprised. You look at Boston College, big underdog, went to Virginia, took care of business, won the series, won Friday night. You have Stanford, went to UNC, Friday night won, series won. Oregon went to USC in their inaugural Big Ten showdown, swept USC. And I think it's really interesting because I know a lot of what we have talked about, especially last year and the start of this year, is, well, game ones, conference play, trends typically favor the home team. And that's something that I think we're going to see a lot of this year. And I think it's important to note, just because a team is home on a Friday, that doesn't mean they're going to win. This is just something to put in the back of your mind. Maybe if you're having trouble, like it's a handicap right down the middle and you want to give the home team the edge because how big of an advantage it usually is, especially in college baseball, then that's really what it's for. It's not a blind, all right, we're going to take all the home teams. The Friday night under train just got destroyed last week. We're off to a rough one. BYU UCF was 12.5. That got out to 17 with a 9-8 UCF victory at BYU. So it's definitely a lot of things that we're going to have to keep an eye on, especially in the opening week where some teams are hot because they haven't played anybody. And then you have other teams that are supposed to be really good that have been struggling a little bit, but you would expect them to turn it around.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you mentioned, that home thing is very important to keep in mind because it does seem like when these really bad teams are coming up with those upsets, they are at home. But that also means, doesn't mean that you can just parlay every single massive home dog. Like even looking at some lines right now, I'm really taking my first glance right now, but Clemson minus 620 against Notre Dame, like that. I feel like that's pretty insane for just about any ACC matchup or any SEC matchup. Like Florida State minus 720, that's a little more understandable with Arnold going.
It's not Arnold going. We're going to get into that one. It's not Arnold going.
Okay, well then
I don't know if the books know that or not, but that's actually going to be the first game we talk about in just a moment here. So it is interesting, some of these pitching developments.
Okay, good to know. This is why I listen to you.
Yeah, this is why I'm doing my homework. But before we get into it, this is what we do every week. Expectations for week 5 with the first week in conference. I know we talked a little bit about what we might see from some of these teams that have been playing poorly or playing well, and if that trend is going to continue or not. Expectations wise, let me just say this. I really want to see how some of these newcomers come in, like Texas into the SEC, Oklahoma into the SEC. You have Arizona State into the Big 12, Arizona into the Big 12. And a lot of those kind of teams coming in first week. There's some travel. You have Virginia going all the way to Cal for Cal's home opener in the ACC conference play. So I think that's something I want to keep my eye on because I think that could dictate a lot throughout the season. And this is something that we might have to keep track of right now and see how it progresses throughout the year to find some good betting opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like you mentioned, there's some serious travel going on, which we haven't seen in the past, right? Okay, I shouldn't say that. We have seen it in the past, and we've seen it affect teams significantly. We haven't seen it in conference play. But I've mentioned probably every time we've been on the show this year already how UConn had that massive West Coast trip last year, and how I've never been that big of a UConn guy, but they had a decent team last year, but a decent team that performed even worse because they had this. It was a California West Coast trip. Then they came back, they played at Auburn. Then they went on like a 12-game West Coast trip after that again. And it's just, that's so grueling for these players. And it's even tough to play that far away from home for that long. So, conference play is a lot different now that, like you said, you've got a team like Duke traveling to Stanford.
I know. And I really can't wait for it. But as we always do, let's call our shot here. The biggest underdog, most likely to win outright. And when we're talking dogs, we're not giving you the plus 130 dog. We're giving you 2-1 or bigger. Who is the biggest dog of plus 200 or bigger, most likely to pull one out on Friday night?
So, I mean, you want me to go first?
Yeah.
So to be honest, I mean, once we get into conference play also, there's not going to be that, besides these massive matchups that we mentioned earlier, like Florida State minus 720 and what was the other one? Clemson minus 620, but I don't have big enough balls to go against them. But I think my play would be Florida plus 230 against Tennessee. Florida's just a good team this year, and Tennessee really hasn't played anyone yet. Like, I do think Tennessee is probably the best team in the nation right now. Like, I'm not saying that, but I do think minus 315 against another very good SEC team is a little heavy. And Florida's good enough they just smoked FSU midweek. I think they're a good enough team to get the win, even on the road there.
It's interesting you say that because that was one I was looking at. And I definitely wanted to talk to you about it and gauge your interest. And that's one of our first games as well. But I would say, honestly, I have probably 3 or 4 ones I'm really looking at. If I'm going to go with just under the plus 200 number here, Hawaii's kicking off at 12:35 a.m. Technically Saturday, even though it's game one, it's the Friday game. It's technically after midnight. The Rainbow Warriors after dark. I mean, I think a lot of our viewers live for Hawaii here, but I think Hawaii at home against Santa Barbara with the travel. A, B, Tyler Bremner. You're paying UC Santa Barbara tax because of Tyler Bremner. They're around minus 250 on the road against a Hawaii team that is pretty good. Now, Bremner has been okay, but he hasn't been great. The pitch count situation, because the team is being precautious of not risking injury. He got bat around a little bit last week. I'm not 100% sold that UC Santa Barbara is going to walk into Hawaii and just sweep them. And I think with I apologize, it's a Japanese kid going on Friday for Hawaii, but they have a really good Saturday guy as well. So what I think I'm probably going to end up doing is playing Hawaii both on Friday and Saturday, because UC Santa Barbara hasn't even designated a game 2 or 3 starter. Jackson Flores has been the Saturday guy, and I've talked him up a lot, and I think he's super talented. I think he's a legitimate top 5 arm in the college class next year for the draft. But he's been getting hit his last 2 starts. So right now, they don't have anybody that I feel totally confident that can go toe-to-toe with Hawaii's pitching staff. And the fact is, you have Hawaii at home at a big number. I think the Rainbow Warriors are a very interesting look this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I like that for sure. And at that number, they win one of the 3 games at home. I think it's a 3-game set. I'm assuming so. But they win one of those 3 games at home, and you're really only losing 0.1. The only thing though is, hopefully these books, what they've been doing, they usually do this. They have all these lines on Friday, right? But then for whatever reason, they're like 5 or 10 games that they just don't put lines up again for Saturday and Sunday. And a lot of times it's those games. Like, for example, Tulane a couple weeks ago, they were playing, I want to say it was Long Beach, and We were both on that game. We loved Tulane that game, and they ended up playing a dud on Friday and absolutely
LMU.
dominated on Saturday and Sunday. We got a line on Friday. We did not get a line on Saturday and Sunday. We would have just tried to win our money back and some.
Yeah.
So really hoping we get consistent lines all weekend as well.
I got to say I'm happy. These lines came out around, I want to say like 5. No, probably like 6 o'clock. These lines came out 6:30. I first noticed them, and I was like, "Oh wow, we're getting lines on a early Thursday." Whereas last week we had to basically wait until the ass crack of midnight to get something, and totals weren't even coming out to almost game time in some cases. So it's nice to see we have that. We don't have totals right now. Part of what we like to do is get this Thursday show done, because we want to give you guys a jump on the lines, give you some time to process, digest, obviously listen to what we have to say, but do your own research as always. And, Friday mornings are tough because most of the time, a lot of the value's gone. Like people have hit these numbers, and where you might have gotten a minus 130 on a home favorite, now they might be minus 160. And that's a game changer, especially when we're talking about 15, 20 play slate, 30 plays, whatever it is. So that's why we like to do it now. And pretty much the lines haven't moved at all. I will say I'm very upset because the weather, as always, has to cause a problem for college baseball, especially Friday night. So UNC was minus 166 going to Louisville this week, a matchup I was looking very forward to. I could have caught it early enough, but my feeling was the total was probably going to be something I looked at for DeCaro and a bounce back versus Patrick Forbes for Louisville, who's been fantastic. And what happened was probably like 30 minutes into me noticing the line, it went away, and I wasn't sure. Louisville announced a doubleheader. So they pull the game, so you can't even bet on it anymore. And UNC was a decent-sized favorite at Louisville. Probably would have went UNC there, but you got to wonder.
Yeah, that's the other thing. We never get odds for double headers, and if we do, it's only one of the games, and that's obviously frustrating because these teams usually split those.
Yeah. There's a lot of underdogs. I don't want to take up too much time doing this because we're going to cover a lot of these lopsided lines, and we can kind of work that in there as well. We do have a comment from our guy, Joe. Give me Ole Miss game 1. That's a big one. Hunter Elliott against Zach Root. Gabe Gackle got the boot from Friday to Saturday. Zach Root's been awesome. He's going to be going Friday. 2 really good lefties in the SEC are going to be dueling it out. That is a College World Series matchup from 2022. That was a low-scoring game. I think it was Connor Nolan against Dylan DeLucia, if memory serves, from a few years ago. But like, subscribe, the channel, the comments, keep them flowing. We will do our best to answer every single one of them. But, John, it's time, baby. First one, Boston College, plus 450 at FSU, a whopping minus 720. You may be wondering, why is Jamie Arnold not going on Friday night? They skipped him last weekend. He was dealing with an illness. Not exactly sure what it was. Maybe it was the flu. I had the flu. It was absolutely fucking miserable. It put me out of commission for 2 weeks, and I'm not even a Friday night starter. So I guess they wanted to ease Arnold back in, so they're throwing him on Saturday. But it's going to be Joey Vellini tomorrow, who's been great. But the problem is, John, FSU hasn't played anybody. They've been racking up these butter matchups, these layups, and that's why before Tuesday against UF in the midweek, they were undefeated. Now, Boston College is going with probably a bullpen game. It's Bobby Ciccione, who's only thrown 4 innings. It looks like he might just be the opener, and Boston College is going to go with a bevy of arms. It worked against Virginia last week. UVA had an offensive explosion on Saturday where I think the total ended up being 38. It was absolutely nuts. But, I mean, it worked at UVA. That was a very impressive series. And to be honest, I wasn't as sold on FSU coming into the year. I knew their pitching was going to be good, and that was even without the possibility of Cam Leiter. The offense has been better than expected, and Boston College doesn't have anything in terms of significant arms. And obviously, UVA's bullpen is flat out awful right now. But what kind of shot do you give BC here on the road against an Arnold-less FSU team?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up. It seems about Arnold, it seems like they have more of a shot than, a lot of people think. Like this is one where I don't know if I can get myself to play Boston College at that plus money, but I'm also not like definitely not including FSU in a parlay at minus 720. It's pretty pointless at that number. Um, so it'll be interesting. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Boston College wins one this weekend, and it's probably going to come in the first game where they can use the top of their pitching staff, right? Instead of the depth where FSU would definitely have the advantage. So, I mean, if you're going to play this, I think I would go BC.
I think so. I mean, to be honest with you, I think Boston College is worth probably a small like 0.1 unit, like $10-$20 bet, just because this, as much as I think we would agree that Boston College isn't a good team, still give them a little respect. They went on the road and they beat Virginia. Even if Virginia is reeling, that's still a very impressive win. And I think Florida State hasn't really shown that they are the class of college or even the ACC yet, because they haven't played anybody. And I personally feel like, as good as Florida State is, their team is nowhere near as good as they were last year. And if you don't feel like playing the plus 450 because you think Joey Vellini is going to shut them down and they have a good bullpen and their offense is going to be good enough, and Boston College is probably going to have to put together 3 or 4 guys to really lock it down, then I think when the run lines come out, we're probably going to get BC somewhere along the lines of a 5.5. And then I think taking a 5.5 run line, something like that would be worth it for BC if you want to get in some action. Be like, well, wait, why is FSU this big? I want to get some action against them.
Yeah, personally, I'm not much of a run line player. If I believe in a team enough to cover a run line, I believe in them enough to actually get the win. Obviously, it burns you, sometimes, but I think for me, I end up profiting more. I hit one of those plus 400 or so, and you really only need one of those for a couple losses. But the way that these books work now, right, is a lot of them are voiding these run lines if they get mercy ruled. So if a run line is 5.5 or 4.5 and you play that, the game's 10 runs out of hand, it's going to get ended before, there's going to be a mercy rule. So if it's close enough, then you can get away with these run lines and either get the run line win or, the game gets mercy ruled.
Well, what I've noticed, at least for me, I haven't gotten anything voided this year one way or another. I've been on the right side of a run rule. I've been on the wrong side of a run rule, and it hasn't mattered. I think maybe 1 or 2 books have been doing that. Bet Rivers didn't void me. I know that's been a big one. DraftKings hasn't voided me. FanDuel hasn't voided me. So they're letting it play out, at least this year. I don't know. I can't speak for anybody else's experience, but to be honest, the run rules haven't really impacted me. And by that point, then I still think it's worth it. And I'm going to disagree with you, because if you can get a 4.5 or a 5.5, that's a lot of runs. That is a lot of runs, especially in a conference game. And Boston College, while they're not a top program, they're not Slapdick State from the D2. This is still a program that can go out there and show out. Next game here is Kentucky, Georgia. It's going to be Nick McKay versus Charlie Goldstein. Georgia is, I believe, 19-1. They're off to a fantastic start, although I would argue their record on paper isn't necessarily reflective of how good they've been. I think they've gotten a little lucky. They've been in some really tight contests against teams that have no business hanging with them, and they managed to pull away. At the same time, I don't think this is anything close to the Kentucky team we saw last year. But Charlie Goldstein, who I feel like is in his 8th year of college, hasn't really gotten a ton of work. He hasn't thrown more than 3 innings in a game this year. Georgia's bullpen should be better this season than it was last year. Do you feel comfortable laying UGA minus 175 at home against the Wildcats?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. Georgia I think that, I mean, I'm going to go off you and say the record's 19-1, but like you mentioned, they've been going down so much. So like these past couple weeks, they've been going down 5-0, 6-0. It seems like they've been down so often, and they, against these bad teams, you're going to be able to rally and come up, and come up with a win. Not against SEC teams. They don't run out of pitching. That being said, I'm not a big believer in Kentucky. They lost a lot of players last year. And I mean, I'm not that I think Georgia can be a good team if they get their pitching in order, but they haven't been playing like that recently. Obviously they can hit with anyone. So at -175, I definitely lean Georgia. I might end up making it a play, but if anything, I would definitely go Georgia at home, even though they've been going down in these games.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because when you go down, it compounds. It's very tough to come back. Even though we say it's never over with a metal bat in college arms, it is tough to do game over game. And for me, 175 is a steep price. And Nick Mangione's still a great head coach. Kentucky is a scrappy ball club, and while they're not the same program, Georgia doesn't ooze enough confidence for me to want to grab them at this price, at least right now. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if tomorrow morning we wake up, Georgia's pushing $2. And in that case, I think for me right now, and Georgia was a preseason Omaha team for me. I like Georgia this year overall. I think they have a lot of talent. Even though they lose Condon and Collins at the top of their lineup, I think their pitching should be a lot better this year. But Georgia is in that bucket of teams that are expected to be really good. And despite their record, I haven't seen it yet. Therefore, this early in the season, first weekend of conference play, I can't lay a 175 with them. Just not something that I'm going to do. I don't think it's a bad play. I just want to see what UGA comes out looking like the first week or two before I start putting my money on them.
Yeah, and at this number, you're going to have, if you play this, if you play Georgia 3 days in a row, they're going to have to win at least 2 of those games. And then even still, you only win a quarter. So I think you have to be really sure in Georgia to play it at this line.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one's a tough one, man. I feel like if I'm making this line, I'm probably putting Georgia more at like -160, maybe -154. I think it's a little bit tighter. Kentucky's pitcher McVay's actually been pretty solid, so that's one where I would definitely be on upset alert if I'm the Dogs. Let's go to the mid majors here. Charlotte at UNCW. UNCW Southern Miss was probably one of the better series last weekend. The pitching was fantastic, tight contest, late swings, and UNCW barely lost that series. Zane Taylor has been a madman on Friday nights. The kid has looked sensational. And for Charlotte, it's going to be Blake Gillespie. That's who they're projecting. You might know Blake Gillespie's name. He threw a no-hit piece against JMU last week, 11 punchies. But before that, Gillespie really wasn't looking that sharp. He was getting hit around a little bit. Now, my thing is, I wonder, do you think Gillespie with the no-hitter last week, got all that momentum, do you think he blew his load, like, for lack of a better word? Like, he's got to regress to the mean. A no-hitter is awesome, but how are you going to follow that up? UNCW's offense hasn't been performing great, but they still have some really good bats, headlined by Tanner Thatch, some of the most raw power in the country, and they have a fantastic pitcher, and their bullpen has performed pretty well, I would say. And you get UNCW at home. Short money line price, John. I like UNCW here.
I don't mind it. I think that's a good call with Charlotte. Their pitcher coming off a no-hitter or even just complete games. I love fading them just because in this early in the season, we really haven't seen pitchers go that deep yet. They're not getting forced. And in college, we see 110 pitches, 120 pitches a lot more often than the majors. They're kids still. They'll get pretty tired doing that. Charlotte has impressed me early. I will say that. I did not think they were going to be, anything other than decent, better than average. And they've been playing really well so far. But UNC Wilmington's been playing well so far too. I think this is a pretty spot on line. Like I think UNC Wilmington should be slight favorites, probably -125, -130. So I think I'll end up staying away from this game and maybe see how the first game of the series goes and then play the rest of the series based on that.
I understand. I'm thinking just because I like the pitching advantage, I like the fact that they're home, and I think they're a little bit better of a team. And Charlotte's no pushover, not by any means. So for me, if I'm playing this one, this is a straight play, no parlay in this one because this really is one of those mid-major coin flips. But Zane Taylor, the way he's been throwing, I gotta keep riding that money train while it's hot. Now we have the big series in the SEC. This is the one that you were alluding to earlier. Florida at Tennessee. Not very often do we think that we're going to see the Florida Gators be a 230 dog, even at the Volunteers, who, for my money, has probably looked like the best team, who probably should be the number one team ranked. Not by much, but definitely ranked number one. Liam Doyle's been off the hook. And I'll say, thus far through the first month, I'll give him props because I thought it would be a solid transfer coming over from Ole Miss. Coastal, he's always had the strikeout stuff, so that was never in question. But at Coastal, he wasn't great. At Ole Miss last year, he was solid. But then coming over to Tennessee, and yes, to Frank Anderson, Tennessee is one of the best pitching programs in the country for a while now. If you want to be a pitcher in college and jump to the pros, you go to Tennessee. But this kid looks like a completely different pitcher. I mean, his fastball is incredible from the left side, 98. It's not just got run, but it's got ride too. It looks like an Andres Munoz pitch from the reliever from the Mariners, the closer from Seattle, who throws 103-mile-an-hour fastball. It doesn't just go like this or like this. It goes like this. Runs and rides same time. That's what fastball is doing for Liam Doyle at 98 as a lefty. Plus, the mix of other pitches looks amazing. That said, he hasn't faced a lineup this good. I would say Oklahoma State has a very good lineup, but it's been a little bit inconsistent this year. It hasn't really hit his stride. Florida, even if Cade Curlin's out, which it looks like he probably is, I still think this is just too big of a number. I think, especially in that bandbox, Florida can get after it. They have guys that can put the ball over the fence. And while Tennessee is a big favorite for a reason, John, there's no way I can take Tennessee here or I can even put them in a parlay. So for me, it's Florida or pass. This could be one where you take straight. And I know you're not a big fan of run lines, but I'd imagine we get a 2.5 run line. That's probably something I'm going to look to take with Florida when that comes out.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is just way too heavy. SEC matchup. You've got to imagine that Florida wins at least one game this series, right? And if they win one game, you play the other two games, you're still coming out profitable. And you minimize risk because it's plus money as opposed to like a Georgia where, you play the minus 175 and they end up losing two of those games. You're losing 2.5 units. So I think it's definitely worth the risk here. Florida can definitely beat Tennessee. Tennessee can lose at home. Like you mentioned, Liam Doyle's been great so far this season. I wasn't too high on him coming into this season, to be honest, but Tennessee really just churns out pitchers, to be honest. And yeah, I mean, you also mentioned Curlin's probably out. He was out midweek against FSU too, and they absolutely smoked FSU. So I like Florida plus money here. I think as long as it's over plus 200, I'd be taking them.
The Battle of Liam's. Liam Peterson has looked pretty good this year, and this is a guy that we're talking about as one of the top arms off the board next year. He's going to have a case to be the best college arm, the first college arm selected in the 26th draft. And another thing of note, why this game is so important for the Gators. Pierce Coppola is definitely out this weekend. He might be out for the year, which is so unfortunate. Like, really big time rooting for Pierce Coppola. Was a joy to watch him while he was, slinging it this year. And they're going to be without Frank Mendez. And if you're Florida, even though it's against Doyle, with the uncertainty in the Saturday-Sunday rolls, I know Jake Clemente, I think, is good to go this weekend for them. That's big for the rotation. But even though it's against Liam Doyle, with Liam Peterson going in uncertainty on Saturday, Sunday, this could be Florida's best chance to grab one because they're probably going to be overmatched with Marcus Phillips or Nate Snead or whoever UNC or Tennessee decides to throw. I apologize. I'm blanking on who they've been throwing on Sundays, but the Gators definitely need to get one, and I think even against Doyle, this is their best chance. Let's go to the Big 12. Oklahoma State minus 140 against West Virginia. Gabe Davis is projected to start, John. He has not looked that good in the transition as a starter. And I'll be honest, I didn't agree with Oklahoma State putting him in, not just as a starter, but a Friday night guy. He's been getting beat up a little bit. And, this OK State team has kind of proven why I didn't want to take them to win the Big 12 this year. Even though it's a good roster, there's some holes up and down this lineup and in this bullpen, as well as the starting rotation. It's good overall, but you can definitely point out some weaknesses. And West Virginia is one of these teams that really hasn't looked good, has looked good, but they haven't really played anybody. So this is why it's tough to put to the test of a 15-1 West Virginia team going to an OK State team that might finally realize, hey, we're in conference play. We need to wake up. Are you siding with OK State here, or is this a West Virginia take it to the bank?
Yeah, Oklahoma State just hasn't gotten off to that good start, and we've seen it with teams like Virginia, like Texas A&M as well. These big programs that a lot of people had, thought were going to be very good this season that just haven't gotten off to good starts. Obviously, that can change in conference play. That's usually where it's starts to be make or break, as you see these teams their first couple weeks of conference play. But I just can't. I can't play Oklahoma State right now. I would have to go West Virginia at plus money, even though they're on the road. These conference matchups, anybody can win, and I like to try to stay away. I usually try to stay away from the heavy road favorites, but plus money, I think that's more than worth a shot, and I'm not betting Oklahoma State right now.
I agree. And Sunday Puncher, ears when we're complete team. I mean, listen, I hate it because I like Oklahoma State. I like it. It's one of these conflicting things for me. Hey, they're a really good team, but they're very capable of laying a goose and a big letdown. And West Virginia, yes, they haven't played anybody. Oklahoma State's definitely had the tougher schedule. They've played some real teams. They had an opening weekend down in Arlington with the Shriners Classic. They had the Houston series where they played Tennessee and Liam Doyle game one. They beat Texas A&M. It is very impressive on some of the teams that they've had to play and honestly have beaten. But we noticed that they're not really at the level they probably will get to at some point in the next 6 weeks or so. And West Virginia throwing Griffin Kern, a lefty who's been really good. And I'll say, I feel like Oklahoma's been struggling against lefties a little bit more. It's an offense that strikes out a lot. And unfortunately, for people that are new, people tuning in, it's not really that available. The lefty-righty splits, there's not that many sources that we can find where for MLB, you go on ESPN and you look at a team split righty versus lefty. But so that's like something that you have to kind of follow along a little bit more. And Kern's been pretty good, and their offense has been hotter. So for me, I'd probably say it's a WVU or pass. But I'll say this. The kid Kern's given up 4 home runs already. Launch pad at OK State. I'd be curious to see what this total is. This could potentially be one of those Friday night overs that I take, price pending. I don't want to give out any if the number's over this because I'd like to do a little bit more analysis on it. But that's something that I would probably keep an eye on for when those totals do drop.
Yeah, those Friday night overs are rare, but I think this would definitely be one of those games that we'd look at for that.
Yeah. All right, let's stay in the Big 12 here. Baylor, Kansas. So Kansas, 29 runs, 5 straight taters against Minnesota in the midweek yesterday at US Bank Stadium, which I think is actually very cool. And so much so, it was a national story on accounts that never post college baseball. We're talking about the Kansas Jayhawks, rock chalk, baby. But let's talk about Baylor, man. I didn't expect a lot of Baylor this season, and I don't know if this team is really destined to do much. But their Friday guy, Ethan Calder, he's been nails, quite frankly. And this is a guy that sneakily been backing these last couple Fridays, and you're getting plus 130, even on the road against Kansas with Dom Vagley going. And Dom Vagley has not been good. His ERA is bloated. His Sierra, I think, is in the 4s, but his ERA has been in the 6s. And even though Kansas, I like them as a team this year, I think they're going to be a very interesting group. I think if I had to side here, I might go with Baylor and Ethan Calder. Not an official play, but I think right now, the way I'm looking at it, I think this line should be a little bit closer to Kansas, maybe minus 150, Baylor plus 120.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. So Kansas last weekend and their past couple weekends, they were another one of those teams. They've been playing close games against teams that they probably shouldn't be in close games against. They were going down early. So I ended up playing Minnesota in that first game. Minnesota got the win, but Kansas is a good enough team where, they kind of need to be woken up in a sense. And so you had a feeling that they were going to wake up. I did not think they were going to score 29 runs. I will say that. That being said, I feel like they're going to start taking, each single game more seriously, but minus 166 still seems heavy for me. Baylor's gotten off to a good start. I don't know if they're going to be a good team this year. Kansas, I do think is going to be a good team, but 166 seems high. I don't think I'm going to go Baylor, but I think it's a little high for Kansas. So this is probably another one where, if it was minus 150, I'd go Kansas, but I think I'm just going to lay off.
I like Sunday Puncher's analysis here. Kansas wins 2 of 3. Baylor's best shot for a win is game 1. Do agree. Calder is going to be most likely Baylor's best shot for a series win or winning a game in a series all season long. And as long as Calder stays hot, and I agree with you, it's not just fading the teams, but it's fading the prices as well here. And I think we bring up a good point. How much of it is impacted off of what Kansas did the other day? 29 runs in one game and due for a little bit of letdown. And we saw what happened with Dallas Baptist against Oklahoma last week. And then their offense was pretty much flat at ULL last Friday. And it wasn't Chase Morgan going. It was a kid with an ERA in the 8s or 9s. So I think that could also come into play. And I think Sunday Puncher also mentioned, what is that total going to be? Are they going to inflate it? Are they going to put that as a 14.5 on a Friday because Kansas came out with nearly a 30 bean in a midweek? And maybe we look at an under there. So I am curious, but at the moment it is Baylor or pass. Nothing official on this look, but definitely something that I would advise looking into if you are interested in taking this game here. All right. Looking forward to this. Texas has been another team that was an Omaha preseason 8. I really like what the Longhorns have. They're going to Mississippi State as a small favorite. Now, this is also being potentially impacted by weather. They haven't announced anything yet, but we don't know if we're going to see a Friday doubleheader or a regular series or what have you, but something to keep in mind. But at the moment, Jared Spencer, Pico Cone, great lefty-lefty matchup. They've both been amazing to start the season. And Texas in their inaugural SEC opener at Mississippi State, a team I was not high on this year. I loved them last year. They were one of my big tickets, and they ripped my heart out of my chest. But Pico Cone's been amazing. Their bullpen's been good. Kind of the same thing, though. They haven't really beaten anybody. They haven't really played anybody. But Texas, they've had this weird hit or miss streak. Like you saw them against Dartmouth at home in week 2. I mean, maybe you could chalk it up to bad weather where it was drizzling and it was really humid or whatever. And their offense didn't really score. Yeah, it was a sweep, but their offense was light against Dartmouth. And then they blow up in the Vegas Classic. They sweep that and they put up 10 runs or 35 runs for the entire series. And then last week against Santa Clara, it wasn't really that impressive. Which version of Texas shows up this week?
Yeah, Texas is one of those teams, one of those programs that is very hit or miss, just like Kansas State. Kansas State, we saw play they were terrible the first, I want to say 2 weekends of the season, then unreal the next 2 weekends of the season. And then they just lose 2 midweek games to Creighton and Omaha. So, I mean, Texas, they're one of those teams. You can never really get a read on them. You don't know which team's going to show up. So I think it's definitely worth a home underdog play. I can't say plus money because it's minus 105, but a home underdog play. I wouldn't be surprised if Mississippi State wins 2 or 3 there.
I gotta be honest. I'm buying in on Texas here. I'm gonna continue my fade of Mississippi State this season. I don't think their offense is that good. I think they've gotten some good contributions off to start. I think Pico Cone's good. But after that, I am just not sold. I think Jared Spencer is going to go into Stark Vegas, twirl a gem. I think the offense is going to do enough. And it is worth noting that, like Oklahoma State, Texas's offense against lefties has not been as good. It's definitely worth it. But at a minus 125 price, backing Jared Spencer, even on the road, is not something I can ignore. And then they're going to turn around and give it to Luke Harrison, who's also been pretty good on Saturday. So while I do think the under here is in play, and Sunday Puncher, appreciate you being active today, buddy, and giving out some good insight as well. I think if this is something, say, in the 11.5, 12.5 range, I'd probably lean under as well. But I'm rolling with the Longhorns here on Friday, and I like them to take the series here, kid. Maybe if my boy Max Ballou can start ripping. He had a quiet weekend. We need to get back on that Golden Spikes track one time. Arizona State plus 130 at TCU. Big 12 matchup. Ben Jacobs going against Tommy Lepore, not Caedmon Parker. Lepore's been okay. Ben Jacobs has been good overall. The home runs have bitten him in the ass. Ordinarily, John, I would be all over Arizona State. I don't like TCU this year. I don't think they're that good. I think they have a few good players. I think their pitching is okay. Arizona State is a team that has so much talent. But I've been tortured to death in the first month of the season because of their bullpen. Their bullpen has blown so many leads. They've blown so many Friday night leads that I can't take it anymore. I think Arizona State would be a perfect spot if their bullpen could hold a 5-run lead, which they can't. Do you feel differently?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Arizona State. And that's kind of what their program's been, right? They've been built around hitting for a very long time. It seems like if they can ever get that pitching, then they can finally take the next step. But we kind of thought that with their starters this year, they would be able to take that step, and they still might be able to. But with that bullpen, it's just, what are you going to do when you get the lead? And, a lot of times in college baseball, it's whoever has that last at bat, in these high scoring games, they're going back and forth, whoever has that last at bat. That's why whoever can get those last 3 outs is so important. I like TCU, I think, at home. Arizona State hasn't been playing great. Like you mentioned, I feel like every line so far that we've talked about has been really sharp. Like, This is one where if TCU was minus 150, I wouldn't even think twice about it. I'd take them. But minus 166 for starting it up there, minus 170, I don't know if I'd play them. So once again, like these lines are really sharp right now. I don't know if the books, realize conference play is starting, and that's why they're able to do this. They have more data on these big teams, something like that. I don't know. But if I had to make a play here, I would go TCU. I'm not sure if I'm going to play them for sure yet.
I might say off this one, Arizona State, to be honest, is still in the dungeon for me. They're in the abyss, the no-bet zone. It is hard to get out of the no-bet zone for me. So far, Coastal's been able to sneak out of the no-bet zone, no-bet list, I should say, as has Kansas State whittled their way out of there. Have a hefty list on the no-bet list. And Arizona State, because of their bullpen troubles, is still residing there. And I'll say this, I mean, their offense is so good. They have so much talent, but the problem is in the late innings with guys on base, they've been falling flat, and that's attributed to some of their losses. I feel like their offense is still great or really good, but I don't think it's been firing on all cylinders either. So for me, I mean, I hope Arizona State wins. I have them to win the Big 12, but I think it's a stay away for me for that reason. Sun Devils don't inspire faith on the road, especially. Yeah, that's a fair point. But same time, I hate TCU. I don't think TCU is anything special. This is actually one I'm really interested in getting your opinion on. The Vandy boys at Auburn. J.D. Thompson, Samuel Dutton. Thompson's been good, not great. ERA in the 3. Sierra sub 2, which suggests he's been unlucky. But personally, I've watched J.D. Thompson a lot. I think he hasn't been as sharp as I was expecting, which is crazy because he's still been pretty good. Samuel Dutton's been a revelation, I think a lot of which has to do with some easier matchups as well. This is a guy that really didn't get a lot of work at LSU last year, and he's showing out as a Friday night guy for Auburn. But the big problem now, I don't know if you saw this, Auburn will be without star catcher Ike Irish all weekend. He got hit by a pitch last week, and he will not play. And he is a huge piece of their offense, huge behind the plate. With that news, where do you make this game? Where do you think Vanderbilt, J.D. Thompson on Friday night is worth a road play, or do you think Auburn can still get it done without Irish?
Yeah, obviously that's huge. I saw you tweet that out, and definitely rose some eyebrows. I don't know. I'm very high on Auburn this year. I think they had something insane like 6 or 8 SEC wins last year. They were one of, if not the worst team. I think Missouri was the worst team in the SEC last year, but Auburn was one of the worst teams. But I do think that they've got the talent, and they're a much better team this year. Vanderbilt was terrible on the road last year, like awful. I think they were something like 10 games under, 8 games under. So once again, Irish being out is massive. I feel like him being in, I might go Auburn at plus money. I feel like that's a good look. I think Vanderbilt's a solid team. They're so much different at home versus on the road. So once again, I don't know what I'd do here. The other games, I'd at least have a lean. I really don't think I even have a lean here. I think this is the perfect line again.
I know I'm struggling with this one here. I think what I would like to do is probably wait for the totals to drop. I'm curious to see what they come out with. J.D. Thompson at Auburn. I mean, so hard not to go with him. And I know the road thing has been a problem for Vanderbilt, but in all fairness, they went out to Grand Canyon in the opening week. They took that one. They went out to UCLA last week. 2 weeks ago. They took that one, and they've actually been relatively impressive on the road, especially when J.D. Thompson has started. So I got to be honest, man. I'm going to wait until the totals drop, but sidewise, I might actually lean Auburn here slightly. Not official yet. I need to do a little bit more soul searching on that one, but this is a really tough series. To me, this is probably one of the toughest conference games to cap this week. And by the way, they are 2-1 away, 1-2 neutral. So
yeah, I mean, are were those true road games though? I was just looking at that.
Well, the Desert Invitational, I think the neutral is technically at the MLB Desert Invitational, but the first game was at Grand Canyon, and that's Grand Canyon's park. Okay. So on paper, that's neutral, but that's really a road game.
Yeah.
I mean, they're still traveling. So, I mean, you could technically qualify it as neutral, but it's a road game.
Yeah. So, I mean, that being said, the crowd is obviously a factor, but the main thing is they're undefeated at home, and they're usually really good at home. And then, like I said, on the road, they're a lot different team. I mean, once again, I don't think I can take Vanderbilt as favorites on the road. And, I guess I'd lean Auburn just by that thought. Irish being out is obviously massive, but, that gives somebody else a chance to get in the lineup and make an impact.
Yeah, slightly in Auburn, like I said, and I'm curious about that total. I think 12.5. 12.5 is probably what I'm going to be hoping for. I think 12.5 is right where it is, because Auburn still does have some firepower. And, the thing is with Vandy, J.D. Thompson's been good, but they still have some good bullpen pieces too that they can turn to on a Friday night. I saw your Hawks and Miller Green. So I think that's probably the better of the cap, but I think I think this is going to be a great matchup. This is going to be a great series. So I felt like we really had to take a little bit of a deeper dive on this one. It's a big slate, so we got some more games coming, and we're going right back to the SEC. Texas A&M, minus 160 on Ryan Prager Day against Zane Adams of Alabama. And John, it's worth noting, nowhere else except for DraftKings, and I could not believe this when I saw it last night. My jaw dropped. I had to pick my jaw up off the floor. There's been a seismic shift in College World Series futures on DK. Seismic shift. But the biggest and most bizarre move has been Texas A&M, who everywhere else is less than 15-1, dropped all the way to 35-1. That is egregious. That is wild. I know they've gotten out to a bad start and they've looked awful. That's nuts. And if you haven't taken a piece of A&M, if you felt like you missed the boat preseason, now's your time. Go fire away on A&M at 35-1. I wouldn't put them anywhere past 15-1 right now. It is pure insanity to think that they should be that far away because you have some legitimate teams that have no chance to win the College World Series ahead of them. I mean, you have Bama at 25-1. You have Vanderbilt at 22-1. You have Stanford tied with them at 35-1. You have Wake tied with them at 35-1. It makes absolutely zero sense. So go in and go play Texas A&M. But for this game, it's Prager Day. This kid has been on fire. He's looked like every bit of a top starter this season. And against Alabama, whose their offense has been lighting it up, Justin LeBron right now, the way he's going, he very well might buck that trend of having an underclassman win the Golden Spikes. He would be, if he did, he'd be the second underclassman, non-draft eligible player to win the Golden Spikes in the last 25 plus years, joining Andrew Vaughn in 2018 at Cal. A&M or Bama?
I feel like this is one of those that the entire world is going to be on. I agree with you. I think Texas A&M is going to be fine. I think they will figure it out, but they are not playing well right now. They have not been playing well to start this season. They shouldn't be minus 160 favorites, even if it's at home, even with Prager going. I feel like this is a very clear Alabama plus money play. Does that mean they're going to win? No, not at all. But I cannot bet on Texas A&M as huge favorites right now. And that kind of just pushes me to Alabama at plus money.
A&M was on my no bet list. This is it for them. This is their shot to get out of the dungeon. If they can succeed here, then I will unlock the chain and let them scurry off to the no bet list. They lose this with Prager at home in the opener. No good. No good. I'm going with Texas A&M. I realize minus 160 steep. Bama's cooking right now. Their offense is firing on all cylinders. Zane Adams is a very good starter. But A&M had a good series last weekend, had an offensive explosion last Friday night, maybe build up some momentum. Their offense looked better. We know they can pitch. I got to ride the Aggies here, man. I believe in this team. I know it was looking very dark the first month. They did not play well. There was a lot of meat left on the bone. There was a lot of adjustments that have to be made. And I don't think they're out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination. But I think for this team, this is where they need to get going. And this is where they need to start the winning streak and start getting back on track, JB. Let's move over here to Oklahoma. Just give me one moment before we die on the stream here. There we go. Sorry about that. Oklahoma, South Carolina, basically a pick 'em. Getting a cramp. Minus 120 here in South Carolina. Kyson Witherspoon against Brandon Stone. Brandon Stone's basically been a reliever, hasn't really gone past 4 or 5 innings. Kyson Witherspoon's been dealing. They haven't played anybody. Sorry, I am dealing with a cramp here. What do you got?
Yeah, you go stretch. I'll talk first on this one. Oklahoma. I mean, this is Once again, very good line in my opinion. Oklahoma's only got one loss so far this season. South Carolina, their first season with a new coach. I think I know they're a good program. I think they'll get it figured out in the next year, the year after that. But I don't think they're that good this year. But, Oklahoma's first game in the SEC, I think I'd lean Oklahoma on the road. They're also a team that you can kind of, they're very hit or miss. I know they only have one loss this season, but they can show up and play a dud. And South Carolina is a team that is very capable of an upset. I know they're, very slight underdogs here. But like I said, they're very capable of an upset. They've got talent. I just think I'd have to go Oklahoma on the road.
Yeah, I love Oklahoma here. I do agree with you, but the fact that South Carolina doesn't have Matthew Becker going in this game, who's been relatively good, and somebody that I've actually enjoyed watching pitching these last few years, Kyson Witherspoon, man, it's hard to fade those guys. When we talk about the Friday night aces, Kyson Witherspoon is that. Kyson Witherspoon is probably going to be a top 5 college arm off the board this year. I don't know if we can name more than a few draft eligible pitchers that have been better than Kyson Witherspoon. This kid has developed in every sense of the word into a full Friday night ace, front of the rotation guy in the major leagues. I do worry about the Oklahoma offense. And Stone on paper has been good, but what do we do? What do we get? Do we get one time through the order? We don't know. And I think at the end of the day, this is when we just got to take the better pitcher in a coin flip matchup. And South Carolina, I mean, they have still a decent roster headlined by Ethan Petrie, but I'm going with the better pitcher here. That's Kyson Witherspoon. And you're getting a minus 120 price. And I got news for you. If Oklahoma wins tomorrow, say, I don't know, 7-2, something like that, then we're probably going to see them be a decent size favorite, something in the minus 150 range on Saturday when his twin brother Malachi goes. Food for thought. All right, we have a small handful left here. Let's get through them. Arkansas, Ole Miss, a coin flip, minus 115 because of weather. The game has been moved up to 3 p.m. Eastern time, so don't forget that. Hunter Elliott, Zach Root, who you got?
I mean, I feel like the total is going to be at like 9. Which obviously wouldn't be too playable. I do think this is going to be extremely low scoring. If we get like a first 5 under, I think that would also be a good look as long as it's not like 3.5 or something insane like that. But I'm a big Arkansas believer. I think Ole Miss is a solid team. It's very hard to fade Hunter Elliott. He's really the only thing about Ole Miss that scares me. But Arkansas does have the pitching to match them. I think Arkansas should be slight favorites here. I don't think this should be pick 'em. So I would probably go Arkansas. But once again, I don't know if I'm going to play them, but I would definitely lean them.
Arkansas, another one of those teams on my no bet list. I don't have anything official. I probably won't. If I did, I think Arkansas, Zach Root, the way he's been throwing has been better. And ultimately, I like Arkansas's bullpen more than Ole Miss. And even though I still don't believe Arkansas has a legitimate offense, I feel like, yeah, they've had a couple explosive innings against no names. I don't know if they're going to have a real offense to carry them throughout the season. But I think pitching-wise, I think the Razorbacks are probably the side I would go on. Miami, Wake. Obviously, it's a big number here. Wake Forest has looked tremendous. Logan Lunsford in his transfer from Mizzou. Mizzou Friday night guy takes over as the Wake Friday night guy. And he's looked good. And they demolished Notre Dame last Friday at home. Miami struggled, lost a series to UConn. Before that, they lost a series to Florida. They have good starting pitchers. Nick Robert, Griffin Hugas in the Friday-Saturday role. Brian Walters, Andrew Walters' brother, famous closer for Miami. He's been decent on Sundays overall. Obviously, you're not likely taking Miami, and you're not going to take Wake Forest laying a $3 favorite. Some parlay pieces for Wake. How do you look at attacking them this week?
Yeah, I love that. I think Wake is the perfect parlay piece. Miami just got smoked by UConn, and they needed like 15 runs in that third game to avoid getting swept at home against a UConn team that has not been playing well at all this year. So I really do like Wake at home. I think they're one of my favorite parlay pieces, and I'm definitely putting them in a parlay.
Same. I have them something official on my Discord. Well, you have to subscribe to get to. You can subscribe and click the link in the comments. We'll talk a little bit more about that as the show progresses. This is one of my big underdogs of the weekend. The Grand Canyon Antelopes with Isaac Lyon going. Plus 280 at Oregon State, Nelson Keljo. Very bizarre. We know Oregon State doesn't have a conference, but the series they're doing is weird. It's Oregon State, Grand Canyon on Friday. Then both of these teams bookend a doubleheader against Santa Clara on Saturday. So I think Grand Canyon's got a noon game and Oregon State's got a 5:30 game. And then they reconvene on Sunday to play each other. So it's very weird. I don't understand what's going on. I feel like I'm watching a Lily Phillips, Bonnie Blue with like another guy threesome happening here. So it's really odd. But in terms of the Friday night game, plus 280 even at Oregon State. I have not been impressed with Oregon State. I stopped betting them a few weeks ago after they had a good win against Virginia in the Round Rock Classic. They lost to Oklahoma and Minnesota, and they did not look good. And my opinion is Nelson Keljo. Well, I think he's good. I do not think he is a legitimate Friday night starter. I do not think this is a guy that should be the Oregon State game one goer for the rest of the season. He could be a 3. He could be a nice hybrid piece because I do like him. I think he's talented. And Lyon has been really good, and this is their best chance to get the win. Grand Canyon should not be plus 280. Oregon State has been playing way, way, way too many close games. And if their offense doesn't get it enough of production from their top 5 hitters, or Arquette, Caraway, Turley, Krieg, and somebody else, it could be tough sledding. Grand Canyon is a great upset piece here for Friday night.
Yeah, I'm with you. Oregon State looked amazing that first weekend. And I ended up playing, I rarely have 2-unit plays, but I ended up playing them that second weekend, 2-unit play, and they ended up winning that game. But since then, they have not looked good to me. Grand Canyon just beat Oregon. They got, I don't know if I would say smoked, but they got beat pretty bad in that second game. But obviously, they were using all their pitching in that first game. They're a team that's more than capable of an upset. I think if I were to play this game, it would definitely be Grand Canyon, and I'm definitely not using Oregon State in a parlay piece.
Absolutely not. I would be steering clear of Oregon State, and I got news for you. They have a lot of talent. This team, pitching and hitting, has a lot of high-octane guys. Dax Whitney is going to be a star. Ethan Kleinschmidt is a pretty good pitcher. He's a good Sunday guy, but there is too much inconsistency with this team. They rely on any given day, they rely on 5 or 6 players to get it done instead of a full 9 batting and however many bullpen pitchers that they have. I think GCU is one of these teams that, especially with a pitcher like Lyon going, who has impeccable command. I think he's only walked 4 guys this year in 4 starts. Can't be that big of a dog. I think realistically, I'd probably have Grand Canyon more at like plus 170, Oregon at minus 220. If Oregon State minus 220, if I was making this line. Duke, Stanford. Duke inaugural travel out west to Stanford. And let's listen. My boy Noah Beanick, preseason in our college experience show, was all over Stanford. He loves Stanford. Shout out to Noah. I didn't think they were going to be as good. And, listen, I still don't think they're that good, but let's give credit where it's due. They went into UNC, a team I hold in very high regard, and they got 2 or 3 on a tough travel spot in their first weekend of the ACC. Now it's a different story, man. Matt Scott at home against Kyle Johnson and Duke. Kyle Johnson's looked bad. Duke's looked bad. I think we were both all over the regression this year. Did not expect a lot. And while I like Kyle Johnson a lot, I think it's been a struggle for him and the Duke pitching staff. Stanford minus 180 is all systems go here.
I'm with you. I love this game. This is This is like your typical everybody's on one side though, and Duke will somehow come out of nowhere and win this game, and then
No,
we won't
no,
get a
no, 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 no,
line.
no, no.
We
Stop,
won't get a
stop, stop.
Stanford line the next 2 days. Like this is exactly how it plays out. But I'm
Stop
with
it.
you.
Don't say
I
that.
love Stanford in this game. I will probably make this a 2-unit play, to be honest. As long as it doesn't go over minus 200. If not, it'll be a pretty good parlay piece with some other team that I love, maybe like a Wake Forest. But Duke has been so bad. They're traveling all the way across the country. Stanford's been really good, especially at home. Even the games that they've been going down, their bats have been lighting it up. They've been coming back in games, which is the sign of a good team, in my opinion. I love Stanford here.
I do too. I think Stanford on Friday night. And here's the thing, Friday night, if Stanford wins, hopefully they do. They get the win tomorrow, hopefully. Saturday, we're going to come back. We're probably going to see Stanford along the lines of the open at minus 230, 240, because, Stanford's rotation is pretty solid. I think, now with Joey Volchko throwing well on Sunday against UNC, that raises his profile a bit, and that can continue the uptick in natural line movement and openings throughout an entire weekend. So Stanford here for sure. And this, honestly, the next step in all sports books in college baseball is getting series prices, because, when you want to lay Stanford, you don't want to have to lay 180, 220, whatever, 3 days in a row. So series prices would be very nice. Arizona hosting Cincinnati. Have not gotten an official who's going for Cincy on the rotation here, but it's going to be Colin McKinney for Arizona, who's looked pretty good. Arizona's one of these teams that it's obviously a fairly long list of teams in my dungeon, on my no bet list. I mean, Zona's kind of come out after a bad opening weekend. Do you think they're a parlay piece? Do you think you take them straight against Cincinnati, who's very pesky?
No, to be honest, I'm not a big Cincinnati fan at all, but Arizona hasn't been playing great to start this season. And Cincinnati, I'm not a big fan of them, but they are capable of upsets. Their bats can go off. They don't have much pitching, but they're more than capable of winning with their bats. So I would definitely lean Cincy here. I'm not playing Arizona at that price. And C. Smith in the chat, Southern Miss and UCLA. I definitely like Southern Miss as a good parlay piece. I don't know about UCLA. I don't totally trust them, but Southern Miss I do.
UCLA I don't trust. And Southern Miss is a big like minus 350 favorite at home. But the problem is, I think that series is going to be impacted by weather. I would definitely check on what's happening there with the rain, because that might impact with a Friday doubleheader or something like that. So definitely keep your eyes out. All right, we have a couple more here. UVA at Cal. Like I said, it's Jay Woolfolk going back to the Friday roll. Evan Blanco, the good news, is returning this weekend. The bad news is it's not till Sunday. They're going to Cal. Austin Turkington, he's been pretty solid. He threw 7 innings, I think 1 run, 10 strikeouts last weekend. And I got news for you. As much as I love Virginia, talking about the travel, tough travel, not a huge Jay Woolfolk backer. Their offense is so hit or miss. Their bullpen is so hit or miss. And while I don't think Cal is anything special, travel advantage, home advantage, and just when you're looking at the roster, there's nothing that's really jumping out as a huge advantage for Virginia with the way they're playing right now.
Yeah, this is one. Virginia's not playing well. They're traveling across the country. I don't think they should be that big of favorites, but I don't trust California this year. I don't think they're a very good team at all. I'm just staying far away from this game.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't put Virginia in a parlay. Absolutely not. If you want to bet them 160 at your own risk, not advising it. I'm advising against it right now. I think after last week, you lose at home to Boston College and your offense goes completely silent after the 4th inning on Sunday. It is a bad look. It's a bad look. Let's get to the game that we highlighted as a big underdog. UC Santa Barbara going to Hawaii. I know some of us have been pushing for that old Hawaii host a region, which would be absolutely electric come June. And it's going to be Itsuki Takamoto for the Bows, who's been pretty good, 3.22 ERA, against Bremner, who's been solid, also 3.44 ERA. But the problem is, and I mentioned this at the top of the broadcast, Bremner maybe in this not preseason or not midseason form yet. The hitting for Santa Barbara is completely unreliable. Hawaii at home, travel advantage, home field advantage, got a good pitcher going, got an offense that's pretty solid behind Takamoto. I don't know how you don't take Hawaii here, man. I really don't. And I got news for you. I'm hitting Hawaii Friday, and I'm hitting them again on Saturday.
I'm with you. Once again, hopefully we get lines all 3 days in Hawaii. I like Hawaii at plus money at home. There's definitely a travel factor, a home field advantage there. UCSB, they hit tanks, they hit home runs, and they pitch. And that's pretty much how they win games. But Hawaii can pitch too. And like I said, I think that home field advantage will be pretty big. And plus 190 is big for a home dog.
I'm actually curious on how Santa Barbara's pitching staff all weekend is going to handle the Hawaii base running. Hawaii's 36 of 48 in stolen bases this year. They run, they cause havoc on the base paths, and that can really throw teams off because as a pitcher, containing base running and limiting leads and trying to make sure guys don't get on and steal their way over to second, and then all of a sudden you throw a wild pitch and they're over at third and off a walk, that's tough. And you have to be very defensively sound to do that. And when you have Hawaii constantly pressing like that over the course of a weekend, I think that's going to accumulate. Like this would be a perfect example. If we had series prices, I'd be betting Hawaii, no doubt. I'd be surprised if the Rainbow Warriors do not get at least one of the first two games in this set. And the fact is, we don't know officially who's throwing for the Gauchos on Saturday or Sunday. This is a Hawaii series. Honestly, I might bet them all 3 days, but I'm definitely betting them Friday, Saturday. And the fact that they're nearly a 2-1 underdog at home is absurd. And like I said, it's because you're paying the Tyler Bremner tax. He hasn't looked good enough yet. He's not in midseason form enough yet for UC Santa Barbara to be laying 250 on a 5-hour flight to Hawaii, who's looked pretty good this season.
I'm with you. I think this is a great number for Hawaii. And like I said, that home field advantage is big there.
Yeah, completely agree. Before we get out of here, John, any other matchups that you're looking at? I know there's a ton on the board, and we skipped, honestly, a couple of good ones, but wanted to prioritize the better ones.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it on this show before, but Tulane at home, only minus 145 against Xavier. Xavier's been really bad this season. They just lost to Southeastern Louisiana, and what was it? LSU got absolutely crushed by LSU. This is like, once again, we need to get lines all 3 games because Tulane could very easily play a dud tomorrow, but I do think they're going to win this series. So I really like Tulane at home there, but that's really the only other game I'm looking at.
Jake Hooker should be going for Xavier. He's pretty solid. He wasn't great against Vandy. I mean, the wind was blowing out heavy to left field, so that attributed to some home runs. So I think that that was a tough break for them there. But I'm trying to find out exactly another game, like any look on NC State, Virginia Tech, or Georgia Tech against Pitt, or Coastal against Georgia Southern, and UCF just came out as a $2 favorite at BYU tomorrow. Anything along those lines?
I think the other one was, I don't mind Coastal in a parlay piece. USF at home against Maryland. I think Maryland's terrible. USF has gotten off to a good start. I think they're a very good look as well, but none of those like mid-tier ACC or SEC teams to me. Like I'm staying off Virginia Tech. I'm staying off the Georgia Tech game. I just don't have much of a feel on those.
What about Kansas State at home against Utah. Minus 180 Kansas State.
That two teams that I hate. It's Kansas State, you never know what you're going to get out of them. You have no idea if you're going to get the really good Kansas State or the really bad Kansas State. And it's such a high extreme. UConn, I'm not high on whatsoever. I know they're coming off that big series win against Miami, but that's not enough for me to believe that they're going to be a good team.
No, I completely understand that. I think it was something that we were worth talking about for sure. But before we get out of here, I do want to mention, if you have not done so already, become a college baseball VIP member today. Let's take the first 30 subscribers. Any subscribers who join get the season pass for $200 using the sign up below, also in the chat. Unlimited plays all season long. We're off to a hot start. Though we did lose the under on the BYU UCF game today, 12.5. That was a real heartbreaker in the late innings there. But excited to have you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll be hopping over to the college experience next in about 15 minutes. John, really appreciate the time today, my friend. Great insight as always.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. Always happy to talk baseball.
We'll see you again next week. Keep an eye out on the old Twitter. I'll be tweeting out if we have some time to do a show tomorrow and preview the Saturday slate. But if not, best of luck this weekend. Go cash some tickets.